what would be a name for the love of a family? Is there a name you can call that? It was called the Hannah cabinet because it was named in honour of my mother, father and brother. It took 6.5 years to build, but what that reinforced really was my love in myself was for my family, for Mum and Dad, David and Ruth Hannah, who adopted me, and my brother Richie. So I was thinking to name that cabinet after them. When I was a young kid and grew up at Busby's Flat, I can remember, just wandering the creeks and just making boats out of beanball things and just playing and making shanghais in those days, and just goofing off. I suppose was a great life, but never bored. When I was young, I was absolutely spoilt, and looking back on it, I took advantage of it too much too. I think and because I had the greatest mother and father who done everything for myself and my brother on no budget at all. We never went without a thing. Yeah, Richie, it was 1955, I think Richie was born, but he was a Down syndrome. And because I grew up with him like that, I never kind of took any notice as any different till I got older than anyone else. Poor little fella, he was such the dearest little bloke, and of course loved me like the bloody end of the world, and the same here. And we continued to, we were more or less inseparable all the time. Everywhere I'd be, he'd be. He'd come over here to the workshop when we started the business, and then, of course, at the end, then he had a stroke at 41. They all reckon I was a bit of a bugger of a kid. Oh, it was a good life, yeah. I mean, I don't think you'd ever get me back in the bush again, though. But I did love it going through it, and to be brought up the way I was brought up, because we lived under a sawmill too, just below a sawmill, and I used to get off cuts from there and muck around with that. See, so I suppose that's where the interest in wood would have come from, I suppose, from an early stage. Once I got to 14, Dad moved to Lismore, and I still don't really know why, whether we moved to Lismore for the reason Dad would have thought I needed a job somewhere, and that, so we moved to Lismore, and I went to high school here for about 6 months at Lismore High. I did like school, I suppose. I always said I didn't, but look, I did like going. You met up with the other kids and, it was laughter and all that kind of thing, But as far as the schoolwork went, putting pen to paper, well, that just wasn't me. Lismore High, we had done the woodwork there, and it was a bit more serious now. We're in high school. And I suppose that's where I thought, then one of the school teachers said to me that, Brownjollies have got a woodwork section. So that's when I went and applied for a job there and actually got it. Brownjollies was a country home furnishing shop that serviced everything for the home in those days. It was New South Wales' largest. So whatever they sold, they serviced. So I got a job there, and it was the start of my career, and grew up with a mob of great blokes. It was a great foundation to work with all those people together for me to grow up with, hearing a lot of people's different ideas from different avenues, whether it was from the upholsterer or the wood carver or whatever, I did meet a young lady when I was 16 and she was 13. And she came over to see a girlfriend of hers that lived next door to my place in Mackenzie Street. And her name was Rhonda Eastman. So, we went out for I suppose what they call it, going steady, I suppose. And So we went out for a fair while until she got into high school, and she had to do and had spend more time on the studies. So her father told me I had to back off for a while. So anyway, that happened, but it didn't last for long, and eventually we got engaged.
I thought he was really handsome, and he had the blonde, sort of surfy looking hair, and he didn't have very good taste in clothing, but he was a nice looking guy. You know, his mum would choose his clothes, so in the day when stripes didn't go with checks, Geoff would wear stripes and checks together.
When we did get married, I was 19 and Rhonda was 17. It was love at first sight. I mean, it still is. And I think we've been married nearly 46 years now. I was 17 at the time, I still remember it, and I was sitting at home and had TV. I think we just got our first TV, and we're all sitting there in the lounge room, and Mum and Dad always had a big tin painted green, and every now and again when I was young I'd rat through it. Anyway, I was here one night ratting through it. Now I'm 17 years old, and I come across this folded up bit of paper there. So I unfolded it and had a look at it, and it was an adoption paper. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, Jesus, what's this all about? And I said to Mum, what's this? And she said, oh, but you're happy, aren't you, love? And from that day ever, I've never ever talked to Mum and Dad about that situation, because I knew that they were upset about the whole thing. It was certainly a shock when I saw it, and I saw it was my name on there, and because I had no idea at all that would have had anything to do with me. So yeah, it was a big shock. But yeah, it was all right. I dealt with it all right, and then I told Rhonda. I developed an interest in furniture in the early period of 1635 and 1850, only through books that I had, because I've been a cabinet maker at Brownjollies. I started my own business in 73. Then I started to get serious of of making things. But only where I'd get ideas would be out of books I'd purchase, because I've never been to any museum or art gallery in Australia when I was young, and only could see out of books what could be done. So that's when I started making, trying to make things and work it out myself, until I was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 1980. I've never heard of the Churchill Fellowship until I think it was Nick Kirkensoff, an eye specialist in Lismore, sent away and got me the application. He heard about it and said, look, you should try this. Although I didn't want to go over there and actually do hands-on in the workshop, I thought I could handle things a bit if I knew what to do. So my request was, can I go there into the workshop and actually go and open the Bureau de Roy or Marie Antoinette's piece of furniture, open it up and have a look at it, take the drawers out to have a look inside it. If I could do that and take photos myself, I think I would be able to manage, rather than spend hands on working on wood, when I think I could do that if I knew what I was doing. When I decided to go out on my own in business was in 73. I come and told Rhonda, I said, oh, look, I think I'll start my own business. Well, she freaked out because we had only had $34 in the bank and had 2 babies. Anyway, I said, oh, we'll be right. So opened the doors, started, and in those days it was all restoration, furniture restoration. And of course Rhonda was down here helping as well, doing that. And the kids were down here in the playpen. So they were in the workshop in all those early days for years while we tried to get off the ground and survive, really.
Neither of our families were wealthy, and you just learn from what your parents did to sort of save money, to make do with what you had. We had no aspirations of having a house full of furniture as soon as we got married, or, we actually lived with Geoff's parents for 2 years after we were married until we could afford to buy this home. And And then we sat up to our kitchen bench on 2 borrowed chairs. We had 2 orange bean bags. And, life was simple.
The beginning of the real high class cabinets started in an exhibition we're having in the Opera House in Sydney, and that was the bicentenary year. So that was the big cabinet. It was big at the time. It was made and went to the Opera House on display down there, and it was all old marketing, which I've learnt from books, but all the ideas I got from England and France while I was there that got culminated into the design of it. And then it was made, and it was an absolutely a hit really. Everyone loved it, and I've never really had it for sale. I've always kept that one. And the next cabinet was the Yarralumla, because once I made the bicentenary cabinet, I could see what you could do more, what more work you could put into something. Then that one went to the State Library in New South Wales for an exhibition we had there with the New South Wales Woodworkers Group. One day I was there on duty, and a phone call comes through from the Mitchell Gallery to say Mrs. Hayden had some time to fill in, and she's seen there was a woodwork exhibition here. Would you show her around? I thought, yeah, because my first reaction was to show Mrs. Hayden my piece of furniture first. And I thought, oh, you can't do that. So I took her around the room and showed her everyone else's furniture and just briefly talked about it. And I thought, oh God, if I keep this up, they're going to have to go to their engagement and I'll miss out showing her my piece. So eventually I got to my piece, and she looked up and she said, who made this? I said, I did. And she said, well, why didn't you show me that first? So that's where the association started. So I showed Mrs. Hayden. She said, well, I think the Australia Honor Fund should purchase this cabinet for Yarralumla. Once the Yarralumla cabinet sold, it means I had some money. So I put some money back into the business, but the rest we survived on until I designed the new one. And now that was set out now to be Australian, because after being through the other two, I could see now where I can go and how I can make things a bit more grander than ever now, because I'm getting a bit more confident in what I'm doing. Anyway, so I decided I'd call it the Australiana cabinet, and it'd have as much Australian content in it as possible. So I think there was 90 Australian woods, 10 European, so 100 woods overall, 90 were Australian. Well, I travelled Australia for 7 years. I couldn't sell it. Everyone wanted it, and everyone wanted to keep it in Australia. I think we had 10,000 signatures. So all the people signed it saying, yeah, we should keep this here, we should do this. But at the end of the day, nothing worked. Then during the Olympics, Naturally Australian, which was a furniture shop in Sydney, wanted it to go to their shop, and we did do the thing for 10 days during the Olympics. And I said to Rhonda, well, this is it. I said, comes home, it can stay in the house, because it's, we just run out of energy. During the 10 days, nearly towards the end, this young bloke walked up. I think he was 40 years old at the time. I have the place for the cabinet. And I went, oh, right, okay. And then kept answering someone else's question and showing them up and showing this. And someone said, oh, is that 23 carat gold there? And yeah, that's gold, Victorian gold. And he stepped forward again. He said, yes, I have for the piece for the cabinet. And I thought, oh, right. Oh, good. Not thinking anything of it. And he said, yes, I have the place for the cabinet in Antwerp. And I thought, I'm thinking while I'm doing, Christ, where in the bloody hell is that? I've heard of it. I don't think I've even heard of Antwerp. Anyway, it kept going, and he said, I will come back in half an hour. We'll talk. And of course I thought, am I bloody hearing this? Is this really happening? So within the month it was delivered. Anyway, I remember, I think it was 2:00 in the morning, we hit the button to say, wrote that down and hit it, and I thought, oh, we've done it. Anyway, the letter come back saying, yeah, we accept. And then I felt Then I looked at all the signatures that said keep it here, and it was just out of reach. It was just terrible. It was just bloody devastating. Within another week, I think we flew over and just met it over there then and installed it in the building. Once we got to Antwerp and installed the cabinet, the owner said, "I want you to write a letter to the cabinet." And I thought, well, that's a strange thing to ask. I've got to write a letter to the cabinet. So I was sitting in the motel room there, and I said, well, I've got to do it because he's bought it and he wants it. I always remember how kind of easy it was to sit down and actually write a letter to the cabinet. And I started off by saying, what a pleasure it was making you, of how we made the children laugh and the adults cry. You'd go to talk to even a man, another woodworker, and he'd burst into tears when you'd go to show him the cabinet. He'd be overwhelmed with what it was. So that's what I wrote. I wrote all those things down that happened over the years. It was a great thing, and I'm glad it happened, and I folded the letter up. I gave it to Paul. He read it. He folded it up. We put it in the envelope. I sealed it. He signed across it, and then he went out of the room and I hid it in a secret compartment. It's progression. So I could look back and think where I've come from and where I can go now. So it's a progressional thing, I think. And the Hannah cabinet's really, it's basically a bit Flemish style. Well, there's nothing like it in the world that I'm aware of that looks like that cabinet. Well, there's always got to be a starting point, and of course the starting point has to start from a drawing board. So the lead up to this is all paper sketches, and then from that one I drew it out full size on a drawing board. So I had to have 2 sheets of 8x4 ply, and then I hinged it and opened it up like that to draw on it. And I think that took 40 hours to actually draw it. A cabinet like that takes 6.5 years in the making, so it'd be about 7.5 years from when it was first, the idea happened. And of course, when you make something like this, if you're going to muck around about it and fool around, you'll never get to the end of it. And of course, what you don't want to do is bloody die halfway through it. The timbers in that cabinet, I think there was 34 of them. Probably half and half European and Australian. I've used red cedar from Gordonvale in Cairns. I bought that in the 80s. And I've also used figured Queensland maple from Queensland. One of the unusual ones in there, I remember being in Sydney at a veneer merchant years ago, and I was just looking through a stack of veneer there, just looking through it, and hidden in between this bunch, I pulled out, it was this bundle of about 30 leaves, and he called it snakeskin sapelli. And it was the most wildest looking piece of things I've ever seen. It looked like snakeskin all over the shop. The dearest piece of timber in the cabinet was the ebony, was for the columns. That piece of wood was 10,300 for to make those columns out of. Once I did get that and got over the shock, because on the way home after it was over, when I looked around the factory and at all this ebony and I picked this up and I put that down and picked it up and I thought, oh look, the colours are going to be all different, all over the shops. And there, that bit there will do. That bit'll be right. That'll get all of them out of one bit. That'll be real good. Oh, that'll have to be worth a bit of money, that bit, I thought. Anyway, and I said to the owner or the importer, he was there in a black starch white shirt, and he pulls out this very thin computer, or what do you call it, an add-up machine, a calculator, out of his pocket. And as soon as I seen that come out, I thought, oh. So anyway, he tapped on there, and then Richie got a bit of chalk and wrote it down, and I pretended I didn't care what we wrote on it, and then I went and looked at it, and there was 10,300 on it, and I looked at it, and all the blood went out of my face. I thought, I'm going to be sick. I nearly fainted. So I went and I sat down on another stack of wood, and I put my head between my legs to get the blood back in my head. And no one's talking. Rhonda's sitting there, I don't know what she was thinking. And then I felt better, and I come back up again, and I walked over and looked at it, and it was still there. We estimated about $2,500 worth of waste in the column. So all the sawdust that come off when you turn to the shavings was on the ground. And those shavings went to Bexhill to a chook pen. Everyone had all these bright ideas what to do with these shavings. Yeah, some of the other materials too is the heart of the New Zealand power shell. In stone, there's lapis lazuli in it, rhodonite, petrified wood. One of the other things that I had when I was on a Churchill Fellowship in 1980, I was in Paris, in Versailles, out of Paris, and I was in the workshop there, and the workers gave me a piece of material out of Marie Antoinette's bedroom. It was her favourite border. Only a bit of material, it was only about that long and about that wide. And they gave me a snippet of it, and they said, "Oh, you can have this," and I was so worried to accept it because I thought, like, should I be taking it? Like, should you be giving it to me? Like, is this legal? I thought, Christ, I don't think it'd be getting into trouble for taking it home. No. So anyway, I had the piece of material. I had it for years, and I cut a piece off, a nice little section of it. It's a little bit of a basket weave and a bunch of roses. And one of the doors that are hidden in the cabinet, which, pardon me, I do show every now and again. You pull it out, and on the back of it, I've housed out a section there, put the little piece of material in, then a little bit of 2mm glass, then a little frame around it that actually holds the material in. So that's where I've used that piece of material. There is a fair bit of market in it, not as probably much as the Australiana cabinet. It's not as intense as what that one was, but it's nevertheless, still a fair bit of marketing was on it. And on the outside, I inlaid magnolia because I think it suited the gentle flow of the cabinet and just was subtle. And of course, when you look at the outside of that cabinet another 50 years, it'll still look nice. If you do something too flamboyant, you'll get sick of it. So some of the individual things, like on the bottle brush, took a long time to make because every hair on the bottle brush is an individual piece. And then every little dot on the end, the little yellow dot, like a pollen dot on the end of your bottle brush, on the end of the brush, that's even a piece of wood stuck on. So it took a long time to build that picture. And also there's a spider hanging off a web there. He's made a web. Well, it was done the same way. It's just a little bit bigger than a hair. Some of the inlay on it is under the top drawers when you pull them out. So when you want to, when you pull the top drawers out, you've got the birds inlaid under, so you can look up under it. It's another place to put it, and there's probably a bit of a, it's a good thing to do, and of course, when you see the reaction of the people when you pull those drawers out and they see underneath them, it's a good reaction. All the birds are actually doing something too. I mean, some of them have got babies. The little barn swallow, she's feeding the babies. In this cabinet, this is the first time I've used coloured veneers because I want to do lorikeets and rosellas, so I did need bright colours. So I've got these dyed colours here from Italy, and although they won't tell you how they do it, how they dye it or everything, well, they told me years and years ago was it done electrically and chemically, and but the colours are not gaudy. Used sparingly. They're a beautiful set of colours. 140 drawers in the Hannah cabinet. So there's quite a lot of dovetails in the cabinet, a lot of secret compartments. In the old days, you'd make these things so people could hide their gems or money or valuables. But of course, today we've got a safe. So I'm probably just keeping the tradition going a little bit. In one of the drawers in the cabinet, the final one, I call the final one. Then I think, oh, look, how can I embellish the final drawer again? So then I thought, oh, well, I should get some gems. It's made out of ivory wood from my hometown and ebony with an ebony bottom, but it's got 10 yellow sapphires, 2 red sapphires, 2 green peridots and an oval amethyst, but they're in a 23 karat gold little capsule that holds them. Only the other day I went to unlock one to show some one when it was on display, just showing another section of it, and I forgot one step that I had to do to be able to get into it. and I had a bit of a meltdown, and because I couldn't work out what to bloody do. So if it's another 8 years before it sells, no one will know where they are, Rhonda reckons. It's the feedback you get from the public that make everything worthwhile, and worthwhile that makes you keep going, because it's the pleasure you seem to give them, because every time someone comes in to see the cabinet, they all seem to go away happy.
So it is lovely to hear people's reaction to his work and think, well, it was all worth it. It was all those sleepless nights when he wakes me up at 3 a.m. and says, what do you think about this for the inner door, or what do you think about this bird for here? And so all those nights when I was woken up at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. to discuss the cabinet, it seems all worthwhile when you do hear people's reaction to it.
It's great to have made something to name it after someone who gave me the world, really. I suppose if my parents haven't come to the Coracai Hospital and adopted me, I could have had any part of a life, couldn't I? I wouldn't have known what I could have had, but I do know what I had because of what they done for me. If I had to show Mum and Dad now, I'd bring them in. I'd take them down to the art gallery and sit them down. I'd probably like to cover it up with the shroud that it was covered when it was unveiled, and say, look, this is the latest piece, Mum and Dad and Richie. Have it. What do you think? And pull the cover off it, and just see what they thought. I could just see how overwhelmed they would be. They wouldn't believe it, you know. The journey from now going back to when I left Brownjollies seems a long time ago. As far as personally it goes, is I've never stopped in that time on my career, and Rhonda's been the backstop here to allow me to have done that. But it's been a journey it hasn't stopped yet.